Hey there, I'm Trish from TrishNewbery.com and welcome to the video tutorial for the triangle scarf. Very simple pattern. What we've got is effectively two triangles and we're going to sew them right sides together. So this is a really versatile pattern with regards to fabrics. You can sew a woven and a knit, or two knits, or two wovens, whatever you like. This scarf looks especially good with something like a fleece, a sherpa, cuddle fur, poodle fur, something soft and fluffy on the inside and something a different contrast on the outside. It's really versatile. So in addition to the fabric, you're going to need some sort of closure. The closure you need is completely up to you. You can use something like this, which is just basically a snap. We attach this to one end and it snaps on to the other. You could use something like that. These are quite cool as well. These are sew-on snaps. They're square shape and they look really nice sewn on. You could use a button and a buttonhole, and if you wanted to, you could just have a buttonhole on one side instead of a button and just thread one end of the triangle through it. You can do what I've done, and I have toggles, the same sort of toggles that you use for anoraks, and I've just created almost a frog, an anorak toggle here, so that will fasten like that. And all I did here was I purchased these, I cut a length of cording to suit, and then I cut leather, or you could use vinyl, whatever you prefer. I just had some leather scraps there, so that will fasten like so. So it's entirely up to you. Oh, you could also use a loop with a button if you wanted to, like that. Just whatever you think looks effective with your choice of fabric. So when you're ready, place your fabric right sides together, and I'm going to use a plain stitch on my sewing machine. I have a ball needle in here so that the fibres are pushed apart and I don't end up with any runs. You could use an overlocker if you wanted to. It really depends on the fabric you're going to use and the look you want. The seams are going to be hidden anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I suggest if you're using two knits, you do use a serger though, because it will give you extra give. And if you're using a home sewing machine, make sure you use a stretch stitch, so lightning bolt, zigzag, something like that. So the other thing, at one side of the triangles we need to leave a turning point. I've left about 10 centimetres, 4 inches, and I've just marked these with different coloured pins so I know where the turning point is when I'm sewing. So all we're going to do is go around the three sides, making sure we back tack at the beginning and end. And I'm going to sew this one at 1 centimetre, but if I was on my serger I'd just sew that at 6 mil. So I'm sewing at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, but if I was using my serger with the overlock stitch I'd be sewing 6 mil, 1/4 inch. Okay, so now we're at the beginning again. What we're going to do is turn this through so we have wrong sides together. Make sure, if you need to, that you trim across these ends just to reduce some of the bulk. make sure you've got all those points turned out well. And what we're going to do now is do a top stitch to close off the hole, and also just to make this sit nicely. Because I've got two different colours, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew one on top and a different colour underneath. So I could sew this orange peachy colour this way out, all the black on top. Now because my black's going to be the outside of my scarf, I'm going to sew it so I can see it. It just helps a bit when you're top stitching to make sure what's going to be seen is on top. So I'm now going to change my thread colours. Okay, so I've put my black thread above, I've put my orangey colour in my bobbin, and I'm going to start off my top stitching at the opening edge. So I sewed this with a 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so I'm just going to come here and turn that in like so, and then match the folds. Now if you sewed 6mm, 1/4 inch, you'd do the same there. Now the width of the top stitching is entirely up to you. The thinner the fabric, the narrower the top stitching, but saying that I pretty much like doing 5mm, just under 1/4 inch. I just think it looks nicer. If you had something very dense like a Sherpa, you might want to increase this anything up to maybe 3/8 inch. Just whatever looks best for your fabric. Do some test stitching first. So I'm going to start by closing up that hole, and I'm just going to start on the edge here. And when I top stitch, I want to push this seam out so that that stitch seam is right on the outside edge, but ever so slightly curled under. Now I am going to take my time with this. Because it's a triangle shape, there is a side with bias, and bias creates stretch, so I don't want to end up with wavy lines. Okay, so I've come back to my starting point. It was worth taking the time to balance the tensions on the two different colours. If you need help with that, I do have a video on my channel you can watch. So now we need to look at the closures that we want to do. So come to the narrower ends like so. Now if you want to sew a buttonhole, when you put a buttonhole, you can make a judgment wherever you want it. It's a good idea if it's equal distance from here to here, so like on that sort of an angle, not so much that way or that way, but entirely up to you. I mean, you could run it like this if you wanted to, at 90 degrees from the bottom edge. It is up to you. If you just did a buttonhole, what you can do is when you're wearing this, you can just thread that end through the buttonhole if you want to have that. Or if you wanted a loop, you could sew a loop to this end, in which case you'd probably sandwich the loop inside the triangle while you were sewing this. For me, I'm going to have these horns with the toggles, so it creates a toggle. So I've just bought these buttons called horns. And I've stuck it together with tape for the simple reason that it's really hard to sew on leather sometimes. You need a leather needle, it can slip around. I'm lucky that this is a nice soft leather and it shouldn't be a problem. So all I've done is I've taped it all together. When you buy these, often these are glued into place, but the glue can come loose really easily. So it's a good idea to just use really easy pull apart tape as well. So just position that where you want it. Now what I'm going to do is just do this. It really doesn't matter which side you put the horn side on. It doesn't matter whether you have it like that or like that when it's finished. You just do whatever suits you. I'm going to want mine to look like this rather than like this. So I'm just going to take some time and cross these over the way I want them to look when it's being worn and just position these in the place I want them. I think is going to be around about there. Okay. So I'll start with this side. So just position it wherever you want, and it's just a matter of sewing around the outside of the leather piece or the vinyl piece to stitch it into place. You may prefer a walking foot if you have especially heavy leather. This leather is very light, so it shouldn't be a problem, but just take your time. It's worth practicing if you're not used to sewing through, and you only get one go. By that I mean when you stitch, if you stitch it badly, it's left with holes, so the holes are there forever. You can't remove them, you can't unpick them, so just do your best and take your time. I'm trying to hand crank this as much as I can. And I still have my black thread on top and my orange thread underneath. You do need to stitch through the cording because the glue that comes with them when they're ready-made will not hold. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is just tear that apart and remove it. So this is just low tack tape. Right, and now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. There's a bit left over there. For the other end. Aha, finally. So there we go, got rid of all the little bits, I trimmed some stray threads, and I'm really happy with that. Good things take time, I guess. So that's it. You're finished. So if your fabric will take it, now's the time to go to the iron and give your fabric a press. Before I go, I wanted to show you a quick way of making this scarf reversible. For this method, you're going to need buttons and a length of cording. So my length of cording is 11 inches, 12.5 centimetres. So to do this, it's pretty much the same as before, but when we sew this, we're going to sew the cording into one of the shorter ends of the scarf. It doesn't matter which end you put this into, but what you're going to do is take your piece of cording and fold it in half and just sandwich it in between the two layers like so. And when we sew up the seam, you could probably wait till you get to the end, let's just wait till we get to the end. So sew those two pieces together. So I'm going to turn around now, so all I'm going to do is just sandwich that in between and butt it up against the seam on one side. And it's up to you, you could sew across a couple of stitches to hold it down if you wanted to. Probably a good idea to go forward a couple and back a couple. And then just when you sew up the other side, just make sure you don't catch it. So we've just got that cording caught inside. And then just finish this off as normal for the rest of the video, and I'll just pick this up in a second. When we've finished doing our top stitching and we've closed up the gap, what we're going to do now is simply put one button on this side, and we're going to sew it back to back with the button on the other side. For this view, I think I'll sew the button quite high. And because one button's got 4 holes and the other's got 2, what I'm going to do is just when I go through this time, I'm just going to make sure that I go through the other set of holes just once, so that I can, so it just looks like it's professionally finished off. So I'll slide that one through that hole. Oops. And back up there. So having to sew buttons on by hand, I really dislike. I might actually do a video tutorial on how to use your sewing machine to stitch on buttons. But for the purposes of this is perfectly fine. So just go through usually about 6 times. It's really up to you. And when you're finished, I'm just going to pass it usually just in between the layers and knot it off. Let's see if I can do it. I should have left a little bit more slack there. And if not, we can just, it's being a bit challenging, I might just do a quick knot there. Generally what you'd do is pass that through the fabric and cut it off. But this is, oh yes, here we go. That was a little bit challenging to get through there. I'm going to go around, pass it through to create the knot, and do it again, pass it through to create the knot, and then I'm going to trim it off in behind the button there. So now we have the option of wearing this like so, with the black side up, or if you wanted to, you could wear it like so with the green side up. Probably better if you have a look at the finished photos and you'll see what I mean. Thanks for joining me, thanks for buying my patterns, and if you like what you see, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and also go ahead and join my Facebook pattern discussion group, the link's below, so you can join in on the conversation and post pictures of makes. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much. Bye.